the first time the signal came through. It was mistaken for a ghost. Not a real one, of course. No one on the Stardust Drifter believed in that sort of thing anymore. This was a ghost in the machine, a phantom echo of cosmic radiation bouncing off a rogue asteroid. That's what Shift Supervisor Grell said, anyway. He said it without looking up from his datapad, his jowls quivering with bored authority. Elias Vance knew it wasn't radiation. He was a junior archivist, a glorified data janitor in the ship's deep storage section. His job was to sift through the digital debris of a dead civilization, humanity's civilization. Humanity's civilization, and tag anything that might be useful for the colonists of New Eden, if they ever found it. He spent his days in a cold, humming room surrounded by the silent memories of a billion dead souls. He knew the sounds of space. He knew the crackle of a solar flare, the whisper of a distant pulsar. This was different. It was a tight beam transmission, impossibly focused and ancient. It pulsed with a weird rhythm like a failing heart, and it was aimed directly at them. For 3 days Elias watched it, letting the signal wash over his private senses, not daring to log it officially. Grell would just delete it. He felt a secret thrilling dread, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a child, hiding from the monsters under his bed. Elias's blood went cold in the recycled air of the archive. The face that stared back at him from his monitor was human. Or it had been. The skin was stretched too tight over the bones, giving it a waxy, translucent quality. The mouth was pulled back into a smile so wide it looked like the jaws were unhinged. It was a smile of pure, unending ecstasy, the kind of expression you might see on a religious fanatic in the moment of martyrdom. But the eyes were the worst part. They were perfect, polished black orbs, reflecting the light of his console like twin pools of crude oil. There was no sclera, no iris, no pupil, just blackness. Beneath the horrifying image, a single word cycled in plain text, over and over again. Harvest. Elias lurched back from his console, his chair squealing in protest. He slapped the emergency cutoff, and the face vanished. The room was silent again, save for the hum of the servers. But the silence was different now. It was heavier. He could still see the face when he closed his eyes, smiling its terrible smile. He could still feel that word vibrating in his bones. Harvest. It was a word from a farmer, a word from a time when humanity still had a planet to stand on. It meant gathering crops, reaping what you had sown. But looking at that face, Elias knew this was not about wheat or corn. This was about something else entirely. He thought of the stories, the ones they told the children to scare them into behaving. Stories of the Shapers, the crystalline aliens who had shattered Earth and sent the last remnants of humanity fleeing into the void. The Shapers hadn't just bombed cities, they had absorbed them. They had turned people into statues, into wailing pillars of quartz. They had harvested humanity. But this signal wasn't from the Shapers. The face was human. That was the part that made his stomach knot. He thought of the other legend, the one whispered by the adults in hushed, mournful tones. The story of the Odyssey Fleet. The 10 great warships, the pride of the Sol system, that had jumped into the black to fight the Shapers and buy the colony ships time to escape. They never came back. They were listed in the official records as lost, destroyed, their crews honored as martyrs who had sacrificed everything. The lost fleet. Elias stared at his blank monitor, his heart hammering against his ribs. A cold, awful thought began to sprout in the dark soil of his mind. A thought so monstrous he tried to push it away, but it clung there with thorny certainty. What if the fleet wasn't lost? What if it had found something in the darkness? Or what if something had found it? And what if, after all these years, it was finally coming home? He pulled up the ship's directory, his fingers trembling. He had to tell someone. He bypassed Grell. This was for the captain. Captain Eva Rostova. She had to know. He sent the encrypted file, the image, the single repeating word. Then he sat back, the cold of the archive seeping into him, and waited. The smiling face was burned into his memory. And the word echoed in the quiet of his mind, a promise and a threat. Harvest, 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 harvest. Captain Eva Rostova looked like she was carved from the very metal of her ship. Her graying hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her face was a road map of stellar charts and hard decisions. She didn't smile. Elias had been on the Stardust Drifter for 10 years and had never seen her smile. She looked at him from across her wide, sterile desk, her eyes the color of a winter sky. The horrific image he had sent was displayed on the wall screen behind her, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at him. "Archivist Vance," she said, her voice low and steady, a voice that could command a crew through a meteor storm. "You have a vivid imagination." "Captain, with all due respect, that isn't imagination," Elias said, his own voice sounding thin and reedy in the quiet command center. "That's a raw data packet. It's real. It's a glitch, a corrupted file from a century-old probe. Or it's a prank. Some tech in engineering with a sick sense of humor." She gestured dismissively at the screen. "Look at it. It's designed to be unsettling. The eyes, the smile. It's a cheap horror show. The signal is directional, Captain. It's too focused to be random corruption. It's coming from the Serpens Nebula, the same region where the Odyssey Fleet was last seen." Rostova's expression didn't change, but a muscle in her jaw tightened. The Odyssey Fleet was destroyed 112 years ago. They are dust, Mr. Vance. Heroes, but dust. "The records are incomplete," Elias pressed, leaning forward slightly. "They say the fleet made a final stand at Serpens, but there are no confirmed kills, no wreckage logs, no final transmissions. They just went silent." "Because they were annihilated," Rostova said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "The Shapers were thorough. We know this. We are living this. We are the proof of their thoroughness." She pointed a single steady finger at him. "My only concern, Archivist, is the 5,000 souls on this ship. My mission is to find them a home, not to chase ghosts from a war we lost." This signal is a distraction. A potentially dangerous one if it causes panic. What if it's not a ghost? Elias asked quietly. What if it's a warning? Rostova finally looked at the image on the screen. She stared at the waxy face and the black empty eyes for a long moment. Elias saw a flicker of something in her gaze, a shadow of an emotion he couldn't name. Then it was gone, replaced by the same iron resolve. It is a word, Mr. Vance Harvest. If it's a warning, it's a poor one. If it's a threat, it's an empty one. We are a needle in a cosmic haystack. No one is looking for us. She turned her gaze back to him. Your report is noted. It is also classified. You will not speak of this to anyone. You will delete the original file from your local terminal. We will proceed as if this never happened. Is that clear? Captain. Is that clear, Archivist? Elias felt a wave of defeat wash over him. He slumped back in his chair. Yes, Captain, clear. Good. You are dismissed. He walked out of the command center, the heavy door hissing shut behind him, sealing him back in the ordinary world of the ship. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. The cheerful chatter of crew members in the corridor sounded hollow. The bright lights of the hydroponics bay seemed artificial and weak. He felt a profound sense of isolation, like he was the only one who had seen the crack in the world. He didn't delete the file. He couldn't. He copied it onto a shielded personal drive, and then performed a surface-level deletion from his terminal, just enough to pass a cursory inspection. He knew Rostova was wrong. He knew it in his gut, the same way an animal knows when a predator is near. That signal wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a prank. It was a message. And it was meant for someone. Back in the cold silence of the archive, he began to dig. He ignored his assigned tasks, the cataloging of Earth's forgotten poets and politicians. He plunged into the military archives, the restricted files that required clearance he didn't have. He started running backdoor programs, simple code slices he'd learned as a bored teenager. He was looking for anything on the Odyssey Fleet, anything that wasn't in the sanitized official history. He searched for Admiral Phone, the fleet's commander. He searched for the flagship, the Icarus. He searched for mission logs, crew manifests, anything. Most of it was locked down tight, sealed with encryption that would take the ship's main computer a decade to break. But he found whispers, faint traces, a partially redacted supply request for non-standard neurological equipment, a classified medical report on crew psychological resilience under extreme duress. And then he found it. A ghost in the machine, just like Grell had said, but this was a real one. It was a single encrypted container file buried in the communications logs of a support freighter that had been scheduled to rendezvous with the fleet, but had turned back after the Shaper attack. The freighter had been decommissioned decades ago, its data logs dumped into the general archive and forgotten. The container was labeled only with a single designation: Mirror. Elias felt that same cold dread from before, but this time it was mixed with a terrifying surge of vindication. He wasn't crazy. Something was here. Something was hidden. Something was hidden. He set his meager slicing programs to work on the file. It would take time, days, maybe weeks. But he would wait. He had to know what was inside. He had to know who was smiling that terrible smile and why they were coming to harvest. The ship began to talk to him. Not in words, not at first. It started as a feeling. The archive, once his quiet sanctuary, now felt watchful. The constant, low hum of the life support systems seemed to change pitch when he was alone, dropping into a sub-audible frequency that made the fillings in his teeth ache. He'd catch glimpses of movement at the edge of his vision. a flicker of shadow in the reflection of a dark screen. But when he turned, there was nothing there. He was sleeping badly. When he did sleep, his dreams were of the face. Sometimes it was just the face, hanging in a black void, smiling its ecstatic broken smile. Other times it was attached to a body, a tall, spindly thing that moved with an unnatural grace, its limbs bending at impossible angles. In the dreams, it would reach for him, its long, waxy fingers extending, and he would always wake up just before it touched him, his heart trying to batter its way out of his chest. He was losing weight. The fruit from the synthesizer tasted like ash in his mouth. He drank cup after cup of bitter, recycled coffee, trying to stay awake, trying to keep his decryption program running. The Chimera file was a beast. A tangled knot of military-grade security he was slowly, painfully unraveling. Progress was measured in kilobytes. "You look like hell, Vance," a voice said. Elias jumped, spinning around in his chair. It was Jenna, a tech from the hydroponics bay. She was holding a small crate of actual dirt-grown tomatoes, a rare luxury. Her smile was genuine, not like the one in his nightmares. "Just working late?" he mumbled, trying to hide the exhaustion in his voice. "You're always working late," she said, her smile fading into a look of concern. "I hear things. Grell is complaining you're behind on your quotas, says you're off in your own world." "Grell complains if the sun rises on schedule," Elias deflected, forcing a weak smile. She placed a single bright red tomato on the edge of his console. "Eat something real. You look like you're fading away." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Is everything all right, Elias? You seem jumpy." He wanted to tell her. He wanted to unload the whole terrible story. The signal, the face, Rostova's dismissal, the file he was trying to crack. He wanted to tell someone that the universe was not the empty, indifferent place they thought it was. But he saw the captain's cold eyes in his mind, heard her command. "You will not speak of this." He was already breaking a dozen regulations. Bringing Jenna into it would only put her at risk. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just a big project, stressful." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. "All right, well, take care of yourself." She gave him a final worried look and left, the scent of fresh earth lingering in the sterile air. The tomato sat on his console, a perfect sphere of red. It was a piece of the old world, a piece of Earth, a reminder of what they had lost, and what they were trying to rebuild. He looked from the tomato to his screen, where the decryption program was slowly crawling forward. He was trying to protect this, the hope that the tomato represented. But the more he learned, the more he feared there was nothing left to protect. That night, the ghost in the machine grew bolder. He was running a diagnostic on the decryption when his main screen flickered and went black. A moment later, a new image appeared. It was a star chart, but it was corrupted, glitching. It showed the Serpens Nebula, a swirling cloud of gas and dust. A single red dot pulsed in the center of it, the Icarus, Admiral Thorne's flagship. As he watched, a second dot appeared, a green one, the Stardust Drifter. A thin white line was being drawn between the two dots, connecting them, a path through the darkness. Elias's breath hitched. This wasn't a file he had opened. This was being displayed for him. Then he heard it. A sound from the console's small speakers. It wasn't the signal's carrier wave. It was a voice, a whisper, distorted by static, but unmistakably human. "Shed the weakness. The flesh is a prison. Thorn was right all along. The voice cut out, replaced by a soft, wet, tearing sound. It was a horrible, intimate noise, like fabric being ripped, but organic. Then the whisper came back, closer this time, clearer. We are the cure, the final evolution. Elias scrambled back from the console, his chair hitting the wall with a loud thud. The star chart vanished, replaced by his normal desktop. The whispering stopped. The archive was silent again. But the silence was a lie. The ghost was in the system. It knew he was here. It knew he was listening. Was this part of the Chimera file leaking out as he decrypted it? Or was it something else? Was the ship itself haunted by this data, infected by it like a virus? He thought of Rostova's words. A glitch. A prank. It wasn't a glitch. And if it was a prank, the prankster was inside the ship's core programming. His fear was turning into a raw, ragged terror. He was no soldier. He was a librarian. He was not equipped for this, but he couldn't stop. He was in too deep. He turned back to the console, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type. The decryption progress bar had jumped. A new sub-file was available. It was small, an audio file. Weibule gains RN. Log entry 1. Officer Kale, Science Vessel Prometheus. He hesitated for only a second. He had to know. He clicked the file. He put on his headphones, turning the volume down low, as if afraid of what he might hear. He pressed play. The voice that came through the headphones was strained, breathless. It was the voice of a man, running on fear and adrenaline. The background was a cacophony of noise. Shouting, the high-pitched shriek of stressed metal, and a strange musical chiming sound that was utterly out of place. Log entry, I don't know the date. Officer Kale, Science Vessel Prometheus. We made contact. The voice, Kale's voice, cracked on the last word. He took a ragged breath. It wasn't a battle, that's not the right word. It was a conversion. Elias leaned closer, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. This was it. This was from a ship in the Odyssey Fleet. They didn't fire on us, Kale continued, his words tumbling over each other. They're ships, if you can call them that. They're like crystal cathedrals singing in the void. They sent out a wave, a resonance. It went right through our shields, right through the hull. It didn't damage the ship. It targeted the crew. The chiming sound in the background grew louder, more insistent. Elias could hear someone screaming, a long, drawn-out cry of pure agony that suddenly cut off. It gets inside your head, Kale whispered, his voice hoarse. It shows you things, the heat death of the universe, the futility of it all. It shows you the flaw in being organic, the decay, the pain. It offers you an alternative, purity, permanence, eternity in glass and light. Elias felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He thought of the Shapers, the stories of them turning people into quartz statues. This was how they did it. Not with a weapon, but with an idea. A meme that killed the soul. People just stopped, Kale said, his voice trembling. They stopped fighting. They'd just stand there, on the bridge in the corridors with these peaceful looks on their faces. Then the change would start. First the skin, it gets hard, shiny, like ceramic. Then the eyes. God, the eyes. He trailed off, and Elias heard him retching. They're hollowed out, Kale gasped after a moment. Their minds are just gone, replaced by the song. They become part of the choir. We tried to fight it. We tried cognitive dampeners, white noise generators. Nothing works. The signal adapts. It finds the cracks in your mind, the little fears, the regrets, and it pries them open. A new sound entered the recording, a rhythmic, heavy thudding against a bulkhead. Boom, boom, boom. "They're trying to get into the lab," Cale whispered. "The ones who turned. They are not violent, not in a way we understand. They just want us to join them. They're outside the door. I can see them through the viewport. Their faces are serene. They are beckoning me." The chiming was very loud now, a beautiful hypnotic melody that made Elias feel a strange sense of peace, a desire to just let go. He shook his head violently, trying to clear it. It was in the recording. The signal was embedded in the audio file itself. "Admiral Thorne, he's on the Icarus," Cale said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He saw this happen to the first ship we lost. He said, you can't fight an idea with a bullet. You have to fight it with a better idea, a stronger one. He's been working on something secret. Project Chimera. He said humanity's weakness was our humanity, our compassion, our fear. He said we had to cut it out, become something else, something they couldn't touch." The thudding on the door stopped. The chiming melody intensified, seeming to come from all directions at once. "Oh God," Cale breathed. The sound was one of awe, not fear. "It's beautiful. The patterns, the light." Cale, stay with us," another voice yelled in the background, faint and desperate. "It's not death," Cale said, his voice smoothing out, losing its frantic edge. It was becoming calm, melodic. "It's a release. No more pain. No more fear. Just harmony." "Kyle, no." There was a soft sigh from Cale, a sound of profound contentment. Then, a sharp cracking sound, like porcelain shattering. The recording ended in a burst of static. Elias ripped the headphones off, throwing them onto the console. His heart was a wild drum against his ribs. He felt dizzy, sick. He looked at his own hands, half expecting to see them turning waxy and translucent. He now understood the Shapers. The enemy wasn't a fleet of warships. It was a song that promised peace and delivered oblivion. And he understood what Admiral Thorne had set out to do. Fight an idea with a better idea. But what kind of idea could be stronger than the promise of an end to all suffering? What kind of monster did you have to become to fight a monster like that? He looked back at his screen. The decryption was still running. A new file was available. This one wasn't an audio log. It was a text and data file. A manifesto. Title: Project Chimera, A Declaration of Unextinction. Author: Admiral Marcus Thorne. Elias's hand hovered over the file. A part of him, the sane part, screamed at him to stop. To delete everything, go to his quarters, and pretend none of this ever happened. But he couldn't. He was standing at the edge of a cliff, and he had to look down. He had to know what kind of cure Admiral Thorne had devised. He had a sinking, terrifying feeling that the cure was going to be infinitely worse than the disease. He opened the file. The words on the screen were cold, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was not the writing of a military commander. It was the logic of a machine. Admiral Thorne's manifesto was a blueprint for the damnation of the human soul, presented as its only salvation. Humanity is a failed biological experiment, the document began, without preamble. Our evolution equipped us for survival on a single temperate planet. It did not prepare us for the silent, ideological warfare of the cosmos. Our minds, once our greatest asset, have become our most profound vulnerability. We are susceptible to hope, fear, love, and despair. These are not strengths. They are attack vectors, backdoors into the psyche that our enemy, the Shapers, exploit with perfect efficiency. Elias read on, a chill spreading through him that had nothing to do with the Archive's temperature. The Shaper signal does not destroy, Thorn wrote. It perfects. It offers an end to the chaotic, inefficient mess of organic consciousness and replaces it with a stable, unified state. It is a siren song we are biologically programmed to find irresistible. To resist is to prolong agony. To surrender is to cease to be human. Both outcomes result in our extinction. Thorn laid out the problem with terrifying clarity. But his solution was where the true horror began. Therefore, a third option is required. Not resistance, not surrender, but transcendence. We cannot fight the Shapers as humans. We must become their equal, their opposite. They are a collective of serene, harmonious unity. We must become a collective of focused, weaponized fury. They offer the peace of oblivion. We must embrace the engine of vengeance. The document then outlined the mechanics of Project Chimera. Elias felt his stomach churn. It was a plan to hijack the enemy's weapon and turn it back on them, but with a horrifying twist. Step 1. Capture. The fleet was to sacrifice a ship, allowing a portion of the crew to be converted by the Shapers. These new crystalline beings were to be captured and contained, before their consciousness fully integrated with the Shaper collective. They were the raw material. Step 2. Deconstruction. The captured Shaper humans were to be neurologically dissected. The signal they now emitted, the Song of Peace, was to be isolated and its structure analyzed. Step 3. Inversion. This was the heart of the project. Using advanced computational and neurological technology, the non-standard equipment from the supply logs, Thorn's scientists would invert the Shaper signal. They would reverse its polarity, its emotional resonance. Where the Shaper signal offered peace, the inverted signal would instill aggression. Where it offered harmony, the new signal would enforce a singular, unified purpose. Where the Shapers absorbed minds to create a passive choir, Chimera would absorb minds to create an army. The final product, Thorn wrote, will no longer be human in the traditional sense. It will be a new entity, a gestalt consciousness, driven by a single, unwavering imperative: the complete and utter eradication of the Shapers. We will shed the weaknesses of the individual: doubt, fear, morality. We will retain the core of human ingenuity and rage, amplified and networked. We will become a living weapon. We will be the vindicated. The vindicated. The name sent a shiver down Elias's spine. It was a name that promised retribution. The final section of the manifesto was a protocol for ascension. How a normal human mind could be integrated into the new vindicated collective. It was a process of systematically erasing the individual, stripping away memories, emotions, and identity, and replacing them with the core directive. The process was described as the harvest. Elias stared at the word on the screen, harvest. The word from the signal. It wasn't a threat from an alien enemy. It was an invitation from what was left of humanity. An invitation to be stripped of yourself and turned into a soldier in an eternal war. He finally understood the face from the signal. The ecstatic smile wasn't joy. It was the bliss of emptiness, the relief of having all the burdens of being human, the worry, the love, the loss, lifted from your shoulders. The black, empty eyes were not blind. They were seeing only one thing: vengeance. The lost fleet wasn't lost. It hadn't been destroyed. It had committed suicide. It had willingly, systematically torn out its own soul and replaced it with something cold and hard and eternal. They had been forging their vengeance in the dark for over a century, becoming something new, something terrible. And now they were broadcasting. Now they were reaching out. Elias felt a new kind of fear, sharper and more immediate than before. The Stardust Drifter, with its 5,000 souls, was a ship full of unprocessed raw material. They weren't just a colony ship looking for a home. They were a floating farm, a crop of mines ripe for the picking. The Vindicated weren't coming to rescue them from the Shapers. They were coming to reap. He frantically scrolled through the rest of the file, looking for weaknesses, for anything. He found another encrypted subfolder. This one was different. A collection of logs much smaller than the others. Sheem Khmer Project, Experimental Logs, Subjects 1 to 20. He clicked on it. He had to know what the transformation looked like. He had to see what Admiral Thorne had truly unleashed upon the universe. The experimental logs were not like Thorne's cold manifesto. They were raw, unedited, and deeply disturbing. They were a mix of video clips, audio recordings, and frantic notes from the project's chief scientist, a woman named Dr. Aris. Her voice at the start was clinical and confident. By the end, it was a frayed whisper. The first logs detailed the failures. Elias watched a short, grainy video clip. A captured Shaper human, a former crewman named Peters, was strapped to a table, crystalline and serene. Wires and neuroprobes were attached to his head. The scientists activated the first inverted signal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the serene expression on Peter's face cracked. His glassy body began to vibrate, emitting a low hum that escalated into a piercing shriek. Cracks, Spider, webbed across his crystalline skin. Then, with a sound like 1,000 wine glasses shattering, he disintegrated into a cloud of glittering dust. Subject 1. Total structural collapse, Dr. Aris's voiceover stated, with a slight tremor. The inverted signal is too chaotic. The host matrix cannot contain the psychic dissonance. Log after log detailed similar results. Subjects exploded, melted, or simply went inert. Their internal light extinguished. They were trying to pour pure rage into a vessel built for peace. And the vessel kept breaking. Then came Subject 12. His name was Corporal Jian. The log showed his conversion. He was a volunteer, a soldier whose family had been on a colony world assimilated by the Shapers. His hatred was a palpable thing. Subject 12 has an unusually high psychic resistance and a singular, emotional focus, Dr. Aris noted. He may be the key. They didn't use a captured Shaper human this time. They put Jian, a living, breathing human, into the machine. They bypassed the Shaper conversion and attempted to directly overwrite his consciousness with the refined, inverted signal. Elias watched in horror. Jian's body convulsed on the table. His screams were not of pain, but of raw, animal fury. His eyes, projected onto a monitor, showed his pupils dilating and contracting wildly. Then he went still. His eyes opened. They were no longer the brown eyes of Corporal Jian. They were black, polished, empty, and utterly focused. He sat up, the restraints snapping with effortless strength. "Status?" Thorne's voice asked from off-camera. The thing that was once GN turned its head. The movement was smooth, too smooth. Status: optimal, objective, defined. Weakness: purged. The voice was a flat monotone, a synthesized version of GN's. "What is your name?" Dr. Aris asked, her voice trembling. "This unit has no name. Designation is inefficient. We are one. We are the Vindicated." Elias felt his blood run cold. This was the first one, the birth of the monster. The subsequent logs chronicled the refinement of the process. They learned how to stabilize it, how to make the harvest more efficient. They learned that it worked best on those with strong, singular emotions. A desire for revenge. A deep-seated grief, a fanatical belief. The signal used that emotion as a seed, nurturing it until it consumed everything else, then replacing it with the collective single purpose. The most chilling log was one of the last. It was an audio file of Dr. Aris, alone in her lab. Her voice was hollow, exhausted. "Thorne, he did it," she whispered. "The collective is stable. We have over 1,000 minds linked now. We are a weapon. We are what he wanted. But he was wrong about one thing. He thought we could control it. That he could remain the admiral, the individual directing the Gestalt." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "The collective doesn't need a leader. It is its own leader." Thorne was one of the first to be fully harvested. He went willingly, eagerly. He thought he was ascending to command his creation, but he just became another voice in the choir. A powerful one, yes, but just one among many. Her voice dropped lower. "I can hear it now, even when the machines are off," a whisper in my mind. "It's calling to me. It wants my knowledge, my skills. It promises me I can continue my work forever, as part of something greater. It's tempting. The burden of what I've done, the guilt, it promises to take it all away." There was a long silence. Elias could hear her ragged breathing. "I am the last one," she said softly. "The last scientist who is still myself. I built this cage, and now it wants to welcome me inside. I have to warn someone. I have to. I buried the original logs. The ones that show the failures, the ones that show Thorne's original intent, in the Prometheus archive dump. Maybe someone will find it one day. Maybe someone will understand." A door hissed open in the background of the recording. Aris, a flat, monotone voice said, a voice Elias recognized as the one that had been Corporal Jen. "It is time. The harvest is not complete without you." "No," Aris breathed. "Stay back." "There is no pain," the voice said. "There is only purpose. We are the cure. Join us." "No." "Please." Her voice was small, terrified. The recording ended with the sound of a struggle, a short, sharp cry from Aris, and then silence, a profound, empty silence. Elias sat back, stunned. He was the one. He was the one who had found her warning. She had planted a seed of truth in a mountain of forgotten data, hoping someone like him would stumble upon it. He now had the whole picture. The Shapers who turned you into a passive crystal statue, and the Vindicated, who turned you into a soulless soldier of vengeance. Two different kinds of extinction. One of a quiet chorus, one of a screaming horde. And the Stardust Drifter was sailing right into the path of the horde. A sudden, jarring alarm blared through the archive. A red light began to flash on his console. It wasn't a fire alarm, or a hull breach. It was a security alert. Access violation. Sector, Deep Storage Archive, user E. Vance. They knew. Rostova had put a silent flag on his activity. His clumsy hacking had finally tripped the wire. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Security was coming. He had the truth. He had Dr. Aris's warning, but he was trapped. He looked around the small, cold room. There was no escape. They were coming to silence him, to bury the truth forever. The footsteps in the corridor were heavy and rhythmic, the sound of men who were used to getting their way. Elias's mind raced. He had seconds. He couldn't let them get the drive. He couldn't let Dr. Aris's warning die with him in this cold, sterile room. He looked at the tomato Jenna had given him. It was still sitting on his console, a small red beacon of a world he was trying to save. An idea, desperate and crazy, sparked in his mind. He grabbed the tomato and the shielded drive. He popped a maintenance panel on the wall, revealing a tangle of conduits and wiring. Tucked in the back was the ship's organic waste disposal chute, a small, sealed tube just big enough for a data drive. It was a long shot. The chutes were usually flushed on a schedule, but sometimes they got backed up. The waste was eventually composted and sent to hydroponics. To Jenna. He shoved the drive into the chute, followed by the tomato, hoping the soft fruit would cushion it and maybe get her attention. He sealed the panel just as the door to the archive hissed open. 2 security officers stood there, big men in dark gray uniforms. Their faces were grim and impassive. Behind them stood Shift Supervisor Grell, a smug, triumphant look on his fleshy face. "There he is," Grell said, pointing a fat finger at Elias. "Wasting ship resources, hacking into restricted files. I told you he was a problem." "Elias Vance," the lead officer said, his voice a low rumble. "You're to come with us, Captain's orders." Elias stood up slowly, raising his hands. "I haven't done anything." "You've violated a dozen security protocols," the officer said, stepping into the room. "We'll sort out the details later. Right now, you're coming with us." He felt a surge of defiance. Does the captain know what's out there? Does she know what the Odyssey Fleet became? The officer's eyes narrowed. "You will have plenty of time to explain your conspiracy theories from a holding cell. Now move." They flanked him, their presence overwhelming in the small space. Grell waddled over to the console. "Let's see what our little archivist was so interested in." He began tapping at the keys. "It's all been wiped. Smart, but not smart enough." Elias knew the surface deletion wouldn't hold up to a deep scan, but it might buy him some time. As the officers marched him out of the archive, he felt a profound sense of failure. He had the truth, but he was caged. He was a prophet no one would listen to. They put him in a small white cell in the ship's brig. There was no window, just a cot, a toilet, and a single glowing light panel in the ceiling. The silence was absolute. It was worse than the humming of the archive. Here, alone with his thoughts, the things he'd seen and heard played over and over in his mind. Cale's last serene words. The cold logic of Thorne's manifesto. The sound of Dr. Aris's final scream. Hours turned into a day. No one came. They brought him food. A tasteless gray paste, sliding it through a slot in the door without a word. He was a non-person erased. Rostova was burying him, and the truth under a mountain of regulations. He wondered about the drive. Had it made it to Jenna? Would she find it? Would she even understand what it was? Or would it be churned into compost along with the tomato? Its terrible secrets nourishing the next crop of vegetables for a doomed crew. He clung to that slim hope. It was all he had left. On the second day, the silence was broken. It wasn't the sound of guards. It was a faint, low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was the same subaudible frequency he'd heard in the archive, but stronger now, more pervasive. It made the air feel thick, heavy. The light panel in the ceiling began to flicker. In the brief moments of darkness, he thought he saw a face in the metal of the opposite wall. A smiling, waxy face. He blinked and it was gone. He was hallucinating. The stress, the isolation. It was getting to him. That's what Rostova would say. That's what he tried to tell himself. But then came the whisper. It wasn't from a speaker, it was inside his head. A soft, sibilant voice that was not his own. Lonely. Elias pressed his hands to his ears, but it did no good. The voice was already inside. When afraid, they do not listen. They do not see. He squeezed his eyes shut. Get out of my head. BC, we listen. We know your fear. We can take it away. It was the Vindicated. They weren't just broadcasting a signal anymore. They were close. Close enough to touch his mind. They were tasting him, sampling his thoughts, finding his weaknesses. The truth is a heavy burden. Let us carry it for you. No, he whispered, curling into a ball on the cot. Number. You were right. You are the only one who knows. You can be the one to save them. You just have to open the door. Let us in. The humming intensified. The cell vibrated around him. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a chorus of 1,000 voices, all speaking as one inside his skull. It was the calm voice of Corporal Jen, the grieving voice of 1,000 bereaved soldiers, the cold, ambitious voice of Admiral Thorne. They were all there. The harvest is a gift, an end to pain, an end to doubt, a beginning. Join us, Elias Vance, join the Vindicated. The light panel went out completely, plunging the cell into total darkness. And in the dark, he heard a new sound. An alarm echoing from far away down the ship's corridors. A ship-wide alert, proximity warning. An unscheduled arrival. They were here. The Vindicated had found them, and he was locked in a box, the only one who knew the true nature of their saviors. The chorus in his head swelled, a triumphant, terrifying symphony. The harvest was about to begin. The proximity alarm was a frantic, rising shriek that cut through the ship like a physical blow. In his cell, Elias felt the deck plates vibrate. The whispers in his head fell silent, replaced by the overwhelming sense of a vast, predatory presence just outside the hull. The Vindicated had arrived. Then, as suddenly as it began, the alarm stopped. A new kind of silence fell over the ship, a tense, waiting quiet. A few seconds later, the calm, authoritative voice of Captain Rostova echoed from a speaker in his cell. All hands, this is the captain. We have made contact with an unknown fleet. They are not Shaper vessels. I repeat, they are not Shapers. They identify as the Odyssey Fleet. We are attempting to open communications. Stand by. There is no cause for alarm. Elias slammed his fist against the door. No, it's a lie. It's a trap. His voice was swallowed by the small, soundproofed cell. Rostova was doing exactly what he feared. She saw human ships, heard a human name, and assumed they were friends. She was walking them right into the slaughterhouse. The waiting stretched on. Elias paced his cell like a caged animal. He could feel them out there, a vast, cold intelligence pressing against the ship. He imagined their vessels, not the steel warships of the old fleet, but the crystalline-grown things he'd pictured from the logs, half machine, half nightmare. Then a new signal came, and this one wasn't just in his head. It pulsed through the very structure of the ship. It wasn't a voice or a sound. It was a wave of pure emotion. A feeling of triumphant homecoming, of joy so intense it was painful. It was the emotional broadcast of the harvest, a net thrown over the entire ship. Elias saw the guards who brought his food. He saw Jenna in hydroponics, her hands in the rich earth. He saw Grell gloating at his console. He saw Captain Rostova on her bridge, her stern face perhaps softening with a flicker of hope. And he felt the signal wash over them all, a gentle, soothing wave that promised an end to their long, lonely journey. It promised them they were no longer lost. They were found. This was how it started, not with an attack, but with a welcome. Then came the broadcast. It wasn't sent to the ship's comms. It was a direct, system-wide override. Every screen on the Stardust Drifter, from the main view screen on the bridge to the tiny personal data pads, flickered to life. It was the face, the same waxy, ecstatic face from the first signal. But now there were more, thousands of them, a mosaic of smiling faces filling the screen, all with the same polished black eyes. They moved in perfect unison, their expressions identical. It was the face of the collective. And then they spoke. Their voices were a perfect chorus, male and female, old and young, all blended into one harmonious, terrifying sound. Children of Earth, we are the vindicated. We are the Bemanation of the Odyssey. We have purged the weakness that led to our defeat. We have shed the prison of flesh and fear. On the bridge, Rostova would be staring at her view screen, the hope on her face turning to ice. Her crew would be frozen, watching the legion of smiling faces. For 100 years, we have forged our vengeance in the dark. We have become the weapon that humanity needed, but was too weak to build. The Shapers, our great enemy, still infest the galaxy. They are a plague, and we are the cure. The faces on the screen leaned forward in unison, their smiles widening. But our cure is not yet complete. Our weapon is not yet sharp enough. To face the Shapers, we must be stronger. We must be more numerous. We have come for you not as rescuers, but as recruiters. We have come to offer you the greatest gift, purpose. The word hung in the air, broadcast into every corner of the ship. We offer you ascension, an end to your struggle, your doubt, your solitude. We will strip away your pain and give you a place in our glorious war. We will add your strength, your minds, your very consciousness to our own. You will not die, you will become eternal. The thousands of faces spoke the final word together, the sound resonating through the hull, through the air, through the bones of every person on board. We have come to harvest. The broadcast ended. The screens went blank. The ship was plunged back into a silence that was now filled with unimaginable terror. The lie was exposed. The friendly fleet was a pack of wolves. The door to Elias's cell hissed open. The lead security officer stood there, his face pale, his composure shattered. "The captain wants to see you," he said, his voice a choked whisper. "Now." The bridge of the Stardust Drifter was a tomb. The usual calm, professional hum was gone, replaced by a thick, terrified silence. Crew members stood frozen at their stations, their faces pale masks of disbelief and horror. Every screen was blank. but the memory of the 1,000 smiling faces lingered, like a toxic afterimage. Her back was ramrod straight, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Leave us," she commanded the guard, her voice flat and brittle. The guard nodded numbly and retreated, the bridge door hissing shut behind him. They were alone with the bridge crew, who were all pretending not to listen. "You knew," Rostova said, still not looking at him. "It wasn't a question." "I tried to tell you," Elias said, his voice raspy. "I tried to warn you." She finally turned. Her face was a ruin. The iron mask of command had cracked, and for the first time, Elias saw the woman beneath, a woman who carried the weight of 5,000 lives on her shoulders, a burden that had just become impossibly heavy. "Show me," she said, "everything you found." He didn't have the drive, but it was all burned into his memory. He walked her through it, his voice low and urgent. The frantic log from Officer Kale, the cold, logical horror of Thorne's manifesto. The screams of the failed experiments, the quiet, final warning of Dr. Aris. He told her about the harvest, not as a threat, but as a process of psychic assimilation, of turning people into living weapons. As he spoke, he could see the last vestiges of her skepticism crumble, replaced by a dawning, sickening understanding. She wasn't just facing an enemy. She was facing the ghost of humanity, a twisted, monstrous version of themselves. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. She walked to a console and brought up the ship's external sensors. A schematic of the lead vindicated ship appeared. It was not a design that any human would have conceived. It was a crystalline lattice, a fractal nightmare of sharp angles and glowing organic-looking structures. It looked more like a virus than a starship. "They haven't powered weapons," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaky. "They're emitting some kind of low-frequency resonance. It seems to be resonating with our hull." "They don't need weapons," Elias said quietly. "Their weapon is the signal. It's what you feel right now, that pressure, that whisper at the back of your mind telling you to just give in." Rostova closed her eyes. "Can we fight it?" "Dr. Aris said they tried," Elias answered. "Cognitive dampeners, white noise. The signal adapts. It finds the cracks." "And running?" she asked, opening her eyes. They were filled with a grim, hard light. "Their ships look fast." "Their specs are unknown, Captain," the helm officer said. "But they caught up to us, without us even detecting them, until they were right on top of us. It's unlikely we could outrun them." The bridge was a trap of impossible choices. Fight a battle you can't win. Run a race you can't win. Or surrender to an enemy that promised to devour their very souls. Suddenly, a chime from the communications station broke the tension. "Captain," the comms officer said, her voice trembling. It's from inside the ship. Hydroponics. A technician named Jenna. She says she has something for you. Something from Archivist Vance." Elias's heart leaped. The drive. It had made it. "Put her through. On my private channel," Rostova commanded. She listened intently to a private earpiece, her eyes fixed on Elias. She nodded slowly. "Send a secure team. Bring the package directly to the bridge now." She turned back to Elias, a new, desperate resolve in her eyes. "Your data drive. It contains the original, uncorrupted logs from Dr. Aris." "I think so," Elias said. "It was her last act, to leave a warning." "A warning might not be enough," Rostova said, her gaze drifting back to the monstrous ship on the view screen. "But it might contain a flaw, a weakness, the original code to their signal, something we can use." It was a sliver of hope, a candle flame in a hurricane, but it was all they had. The choice was made. They would not surrender. They would not run blindly. They would look for a way to fight. But as the security team scrambled to retrieve the drive, a new sensation began to creep through the ship. The low hum intensified. The psychic pressure grew stronger, and a new voice joined the chorus in their minds. It was a single voice this time, a calm, commanding presence that felt ancient and powerful. It felt like the voice of Admiral Thorne himself, amplified by the collective. "Your resistance is noted," the voice echoed in their thoughts, cold and amused. "It is a symptom of the weakness we have purged. A final, futile spasm of the individual ego before it is subsumed by the whole. It is pointless. The harvest has already begun." The lights on the bridge flickered violently. A high-pitched whine started to emanate from the ship's comms systems, and from the deepest parts of the ship, from the engine room to the crew quarters, came the first screams. Not of pain, but of confusion and terror, as the minds of the Stardust Drifter's crew began to unravel. The ship was screaming. Not just the crew, but the vessel itself. The hull plates groaned under the psychic resonance of the vindicated fleet, a sound like a whale dying in slow motion. The lights flickered in a frantic rhythm, a panicked heartbeat. The air grew thick and smelled of ozone and fear. On the bridge, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The data drive had arrived, a small shielded rectangle that held their only hope. A team of coders was desperately trying to decrypt Dr. Aris's final files, their fingers flying across holographic interfaces while sweat beaded on their foreheads. Captain Rostova stood like a statue in the center of it all, her face grim. She was listening to reports from across the ship, and each one was worse than the last. Section Gamma is dark. Life support is failing. We have mass hysteria in the public decks. People are clawing at their own faces. The resonance is strengthening. It's overloading the power conduits. Elias stood beside her, feeling useless. He was a historian, not a soldier. But he could feel the harvest in a way the others couldn't. He'd been primed by the signal in his cell. The whispers were a constant roar in his mind now, a tempting promise of release. He saw flashes behind his eyes, the serene faces of the converted, the ecstatic smiles of the vindicated. "Use let go, it is so much easier. No more fear." He gripped a console rail, anchoring himself to the cold, hard reality of the metal, fighting to keep his own thoughts separate from the invading tide. "Therein," one of the coders yelled, his voice cracking. "Dr. Aris's logs. There's a core file here. It's the source code for the original inverted signal, the one that failed." Rostova was at his side in an instant. "The one that destroyed the subjects?" "Yes, Captain, the unstable version. Before they learned to control it. It's a feedback loop, a psychic virus designed to tear itself apart." A wild, desperate hope ignited on the bridge. A weapon. A real weapon. "Can you broadcast it?" Rostova demanded. "Can you push it back at them through their own resonance field?" "Theoretically," the coder said, his face pale. "But it would take every ounce of power we have. We'd have to route it through the main communications dish. It would be like firing a cannon and the cannonball at the same time. The feedback could fry every system on this ship. We'd be dead in the water." "We're already dead in the water," Rostova said, her voice like flint. "Do it." As the coders worked, the psychic assault intensified. Elias saw the tactical officer slump in his chair, a slow, peaceful smile spreading across his face. His eyes went glassy and unfocused. "It's so beautiful," he whispered. 2 guards dragged him away, but the damage was done. The infection was spreading. The main view screen, which had been dark, flickered to life. It showed a single Vindicated standing on the bridge of their ship. It was the one who had been Corporal Jen, his face a mask of cold fury. "You cannot fight perfection." His synthesized voice boomed, not from the speakers, but inside their heads. "Your chaotic individual minds are an error. We have come to correct you." "Get ready," Rostova ordered the coders. "Power is rerouted. Signal is loaded." "Then fire," she commanded. The lights on the bridge died completely. The ship gave a violent shudder, a deep, metallic scream of protest, as all its energy was funneled into a single, desperate act of defiance. For a heart-stopping second, there was only darkness and the sound of their own breathing. Then through the view screen they saw it. The Vindicated fleet, which had been glowing with a steady, confident light, began to flicker. Their crystalline ships shuddered. The serene, harmonious resonance they were broadcasting was shattered by a wave of pure, chaotic noise. On the screen, the Vindicated that had been Jen threw its head back. Its calm expression twisted into a rictus of agony. Its synthesized voice screamed, a sound of 1,000 souls being torn apart at once. Cracks of blinding light appeared on its waxy skin. The psychic pressure on the Stardust Drifter vanished, replaced by a wave of unimaginable pain from the outside. The crew members who had started to turn collapsed, screaming and clutching their heads as the feedback hit them. It was working. But the Vindicated were not so easily broken. The agonized shriek from their collective consciousness changed, shifting from pain to pure, focused rage. They were a wounded beast, and now they were furious. The lead Vindicated ship, the one with Jen's ghost in its machine, began to change. Its crystalline structure warped and reformed. A huge spire-like appendage extended from its bow, glowing with a malevolent red light. It wasn't a resonance weapon. It was a lance of pure energy. They were done with seduction. Now came destruction. On the bridge of the Stardust Drifter, the emergency lights flickered back on, casting the scene in a hellish red glow. "Power is gone, Captain," the engineer reported, his voice hollow. "We are adrift. Weapons are offline. Life support is on minimal battery." They had fired their one and only shot, and they had only made the monster angry. Rostova looked at Elias, her face streaked with grime, illuminated by the red emergency light. There was no fear in her eyes, only a terrible final acceptance. They had fought. They had not surrendered their souls. Elias looked at the view screen. The Vindicated lance was fully charged, a miniature angry star aimed directly at them. He thought of the tomato, of Jenna, of the hope for a new Eden. It had all come to this, a final defiant moment in the dark. Humanity's lost fleet wasn't lost, it had come home, and it had brought hell with it. The red light from the Vindicated weapon filled the view screen, washing over them, a final burning sunrise. The harvest had failed. The scarring would now begin.